A big welcome to Mariah, who is the She Safe, We Safe campaign coordinator for Black Youth Project 100. Um, and I'm sure Mariah will give us more information about that organization. But Mariah is here for us to think about the ways in which divesting from police is a Black queer feminist issue, and get us privy on the work that is happening here in North Carolina. So welcome, Mariah. We appreciate you being here, and we, as I get your presentation squared away, if you want to introduce yourself more and say some words.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much, Femi, for the introduction. Thank you for NC Block for having me and taking the intentionality with making sure that this presentation is as accessible as possible. As Femi said, my name is Mariah. My pronouns are she and they, and I am a member of BYP 100, Black Youth Project 100, and our current organizer for our national campaign, She Safe, We Safe. I'm excited to talk to you all about this campaign that is very close to my heart and close to my work and is my work. And also give you all a bit of a grounding on BYP 100 as an organization. I'm not sure what exactly the demographics look like in this room, but I'm excited to share with you the mission and vision of the work we have at BYP 100 and the goals of this campaign in particular around divesting from police and investing in community-led solutions. So I have this yummy presentation. I'll also have time for questions at the end of this presentation. If questions come up for you in the middle of this, as I'm presenting, you can use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your page. It should be next to participants, I believe. And you can write down a question that you may have. If it's more of a immediate service question in terms of a point of clarity, you can use the chat feature. So I can make sure to answer it before we move on. And so again, people can understand as much as possible. Also, I invite you to use the chat feature. Yes, this is a webinar, but I want to hear the voices of the people in this room too, and how you all understand some of the concepts I'll be bringing up during this presentation. So yes, please use the chat feature. And we can start now. How are folks doing today? Give me a one word, just feeling of how you're feeling coming to this meeting today. Curious, okay. Open, excited, exclamation point, okay. Productive, ready. Tied, nody. Resilient, glad to be here. A series, but I'll take it, okay. Inspired, beautiful. I can't help with the hunger. Exactly. So we know how to use the chat feature. I love it. I'm going to be paying as much attention as possible to make sure that I get you all voices in here. And let's get into it. Let's go to our next slide. So just a bit about, what we're going to be covering today for this workshop. Ready to learn, y'all. I'm ready that y'all ready. So yeah, we're going to be talking about who is BYP 100, a brief history of our organization, defining the margin. We'll get into that as we progress throughout this presentation of what that means and why it makes sense. Our current and past campaigns, why She Safe, We Safe, the goals of our campaign. We collectively are going to figure out how we understand and define gender-based violence and how that informs this work. We'll update on what's happened in the campaign thus far, how to get involved, what you can do now, and again, our question and answer portion of this webinar. So if that sounds good, again, I love the affirmations, y'all. In the chat, sound off, go all the way off. We'll go to our next slide. So who is BYP 100, y'all? BYP 100 is a national member-based organization of Black 18 to 35-year-old activists and organizers dedicated to creating justice and freedom for all Black people. Yes, we do this through building a network focused on transformative leadership development, direct action organizing, advocacy, and political education using a Black queer feminist lens. That was a lot of words, and we're going to break it down as much as possible to make sure you get what I'm putting out. Next slide, please. So before we get into that, just who are we, what are we about, right? The people who are members of our organization, what are we asking them to be committed to, and what do we as an organization commit ourselves to being for our members? So things that we believe. Number one, we are the experts of our own experiences. Unfortunately, we live in a society that the ruling class, they do not believe that things exist unless it happens to them. And it's not necessarily how we move as an organization. Our experiences are valid and enough, and we are the experts of them. We don't need to, there doesn't need to be research to be done to know that our experiences are real and lived and should be listened to and heard. Another one of our core values, the radical and purposeful inclusion of all Black people. What does that look like? It looks like a lot of movement works in the past.
Mucho del trabajo de movimiento en el pasado no incluye todas las personas negras. Hay una jerarquía de quien decida ser incluido, y entonces esa jerarquía es típicamente refleja ya quién es el enfoque, ¿no? Y inclusión a propósito es haciendo espacio, y no solamente hacer espacio, porque muchas veces cuando hacemos espacio empujamos a las personas al lado, pero también crear un lugar donde incluya a todas las personas negras. No quiere decir que somos perfectos, pero es que estamos trabajando para asegurar y crear espacio y mantener.
Another one, collective vision and action. So again, as you heard when I introduced, BYP is a Black-led organization, and members of the organization
por negres, y entonces los miembros deben de ser negres entre la edad 18 a 35, pero también hay una división de cómo movemos, tiene que ver mucho con los valores. Nuestro futuro incluye inclusión propuesta radical de todas las personas negras y asegurarnos que todas las experiencias negras son valoradas.
And action, right? Making sure we're not only saying this, but living by these values. Collective, holistic energy. That might sound fancy, but essentially it means that we try our best to bring our whole selves into the work, whatever that looks like. That also can look like, how are we taking care of ourselves, like mentally? Like, how is our hearts doing? How is our spirit doing? And how are we bringing our fullest selves into the work? And last but not least, challenge and growth. When I think of challenge, I think of iron sharpening iron. I think of, I might not always be comfortable, but I'm always willing to learn and also willing to be taught. I think that growth is not necessarily a comfortable process, but I think it's a necessary process. And it's actually very, very human. The moment we stop growing and learning, the moment we can't really function as the way we need to function anymore as people. So I believe, I'm so glad it's what my organization believes as an entity who creates a container for Black people to organize for a future that will benefit all of us. Next slide. Let's get into a bit of the jargon that I mentioned when defining how we organize, right? So real quick, it's super, super easy. A Black queer feminist lens, when we organize through that, when we say this is our politic, simply means centering the margin, right? But what is the margin, y'all? Next slide. I'm asking for the slide feature. I told y'all we were gonna use it, here it is. I see a question in the chat. That's a lovely, lovely question to put in the Q&A box, so we can use that there, but the chat will use it for more immediate questions and interaction. So I see it, but please move it to Q&A so it won't get lost in the mini conversations we'll be having together during this time. Question I have for folks here, in our society, right? Who is considered? So like who is prioritized? Who is the main, who are the people who are put to the center, right? Whose needs are typically met. An example I would give to just get the wheels turning is that we are assuming that everybody can see this presentation, that everybody on this call can see. And most things throughout our society are built so somebody has to see it to be able to receive that information. So who is prioritized, y'all? Who is at the center? White, straight, cis men. Okay. Defining cis as in you identify with the gender that you were assigned to at birth. Non-disabled. Okay. Yes. Let's get more particular with it. Non-disabled. Cis straight men. Yes. White women. All right. Able-bodied folks. Yes, thank you. Any more coming to folks' side? No pressure. These are all really good. Money, right? Like financial status. There's an assumption that people can buy things that they need. Neurotypical people. Yes, so people who are quote unquote, nothing's wrong with their brain to be able to process or absorb things. People have laptops, right? So accessibility, I see where we're getting. I like where y'all are going. People not considered fat. Rich folks, we neurotypical again. Beautiful. So yes, not elderly folks. So the other side of that coin, right, is who is forgotten? Who are the people who are not centered? Who are the people that society isn't designed for them to succeed? It's not designed with them in mind. Poor, young folks, children, Black trans women, over 60, poor elders in particular, immigrants, yes. Learning differently abled folks. Exactly. An example I'll give that when I was working on this presentation was, these are our colors for the She Safe, We Safe campaign. And I started making the presentation and I realized that, wait, I can't really overlap green and red for folks that are colorblind. They're gonna see like mud and maybe not be able to read my words that well. And so literally I redesigned this presentation in hopes that it was more accessible to people who might be colorblind. Again, Block has taken the beautiful, beautiful steps to make sure that this is accessible to people who English is not their first language. I wouldn't say native tongue, but first language. Other folks, right, non-English speaking people, Black women, non-binary and gender non-conforming people, yes. Single Black fathers, religious minorities, yes. Single mothers, yes, yes. Beautiful, y'all. Thank you so much. Okay, so we get it. So again, a Black queer feminist lens is saying those people on the margin are the ones that we need to organize around. Incarcerated. Thank you so much for mentioning incarcerated folk. Beautiful, beautiful. Okay. We're centering the margin in our work as Black queer feminist organizers. Yes. Next slide. And so y'all hit on a lot of these. Props to y'all. But yes, thinking about, again, who is not considered, right? So we had some folks say immigration. There's also a lens around immigration, right, where it's made to seem to be a border issue, but only a border issue of like landlocked, right? So when we say immigrants, do people think of people from Africa, people from Europe, people from other places? What is the narrative that we've been convinced that this is what an immigration issue looks like? And yeah, we talked about accessibility, particularly about one, this call, but then two, getting into buildings, right? There are apartment buildings that don't have elevators or places don't have escalators, or there's only, typical buildings only having one quote unquote handicap spot for places to get to. We talked about incarceration. I wanted to mention reproductive justice as well. When I think of in terms of who's on the margin, we said Black women, but not only Black women can give birth, right? Folks might not identify, or not even identify, but be Black women, but cannot give birth, or can give birth rather. I have to think about these things too. Also education, right? We live in a society where higher education is expected, but not taken care of by our government, right? We're told that to succeed, we need a higher level of education, yet that's not supplied by the nation that we live in. And I'm sure we all know, and are fully aware of right now in this moment of COVID, how all of these ways that we notice how the margin pops up are being severely failed in this moment. I'm thinking about curbside pickup, something very simple. Going to a restaurant and ordering food. I can now get it brought up to my car. Why couldn't that be done before? People need to walk in, people need to walk. People need to walk into a space to be able to get food, right? Thinking about incarceration. When COVID was exacerbated, there was calls for, when there's still calls, for folks who didn't have violent charges and then charges period to be released from jail, because COVID is a close proximity virus, right? And so again, how are the people who are not considered to be considered? Yes, this is how we define the margin. Yummy, the question and answer feature is being used. Beautiful. All right, next slide, please. We're gonna go into the history of my lovely, lovely organization. So first of all, it is our birthday week. Turn up, give me some virtual balloons, claps, whatever. But it is the 7th year birthday of BYP 100 this past Monday, actually. Happy birthday. I tried to make it festive on the presentation, okay? So the way that we got started as an organization was actually due to writer, organizer, Dr. Kathy Cohen, who gathered folks in Chicago actually in 2012, about 100 people, you'll see where we got that, to be able to figure out how Black organizers want to move in a moment that we were experiencing, like a little bit similar in terms of being severely failed by our government, right? And so the next convening that happened was called the Beyond November Movement convening, where Black organizers in that time understood that more needs to be done outside of electoral work in particular voting being the solution to our problems as a people. And within this convening, the verdict came down for George Zimmerman, the murder of Trayvon Martin, to say that he wasn't guilty, right? We saw a severe failing and acknowledgement of the value of Black life and how that was never going to be a consideration of our government system, of the carceral system, of the judicial system, how we cannot rely on that form of justice to meet the needs of Black people. So out of that, BYP 100 was born in Chicago. Chicago is the OG hub. It's obviously the longest chapter. And now we have 10 chapters across the continental United States. This is NC Block. We have a chapter in Durham, North Carolina, and also national members, including myself, because I'm not in Durham, national members throughout the continental US as well, where national members would organize locally, as well as for this national campaign that we're going to get into some more. But local chapters focus on local happenings to be able to address the needs of their city. But let's get into it a bit more. We'll talk about some past campaigns. Next slide, please. So this list is definitely not exhaustive, but here's some of the, I'll go into some of the campaigns that we've done as an organization and are currently doing. One that I'm personally excited about is called Green Light Black Futures, which is located in Detroit, Michigan. So the city has put up, is doing extreme and unnecessary surveillance of its community and has incentivized businesses to put cameras out of around their business to profile crime in quotes, y'all, with the sense of that if people are being watched, then they won't commit crime. And again, not acknowledging what's the root of why people commit crimes. It's out of necessity, it's out of need, and out of desperation to take care of oneself. But so Green Light Black Futures is obviously against this level of surveillance and wants to get that reversed in the city. Another one I'm really excited about, and then I'll touch on one from local. One I'm really excited about is Decrim Now in BC and newly in New York City. Decrim Now is decrim in terms of decriminalizing sex work, is valuing the sex work as work and as a valid means to take care of oneself and should not be punished by law. So Decrim Now DC has been working closely with local sex workers and working policy-wise to make sure that, or to ensure rather, that people who engage in sex work are not incarcerated and arrested and criminalized. And let's see, one that some of you all might have heard of is Durham Beyond Policing. Durham Beyond Policing was started around, I guess, 2016 at this point to go against the now built new headquarters, police headquarters in Durham, and was recently rebooted because last year Durham City Council wanted to add, I believe, like $24 million worth of money to go to expanding the police force. And that did not work thanks to organizers in Durham, and BYP is one of the anchoring organizations of Durham Beyond Policing. Another is Song, who we work with In Money Bail. I put Song in quotes because that's Song's baby, and they have allowed us to take care of the baby as well for In Money Bail. All of our campaigns approach our work again through a Black queer feminist lens, but also using an invest divest framework, right? So investing in community-led solutions, investing in the wants and needs of community, and divesting from what doesn't serve community. Again, beyond police, right? Who, if we understand that police don't keep us safe, who does, and what support is needed to make sure it's done in a way that serves the community. Hooray, hooray. You feeling good? How folks feeling? I got some questions. Yes, my balloons. Appreciate y'all. Yes, yes, okay. So let's get into it. She Safe, We Safe. The campaign is a transformative movement aimed to end gender-based violence against Black women, girls, femmes, and gender non-conforming folk. Now that's a little wordy, it's a little heady, and we'll get into that too, but let's also get into the goals of the campaign. Next slide, please. So the goals we have for this campaign is 1, increase interventions to gender-based violence available to Black women, girls, and gender non-conforming people and communities that do not rely on contact with the police. We can add or any law enforcement, for real, y'all. We don't need them. Police do not keep us safe. Police literally were designed to not keep us safe, to not keep people safe, to not keep Black people safe, to only keep the interests of the ruling class, which was and still is white elitists, right? Next goal we have is reallocating funding from police, very specifically, to community-determined programs that address gender-based violence in Black communities. Number 1, we say Black communities because Black people in neither our communities are a monolith, right? There's so many intersections of what a Black community looks like. But again, cops don't exist in those. Cops do not exist in those communities. And again, when the largest amount of funding is going to cops in majority of major cities, what can we do with that money? When we talk to community and see what we need, what does that look like? How do we address it ourselves and not use police? Cool. Next slide, please. So let's define gender-based violence. Yes, words, words, words. We got to get into the jargon. So this is a chat question. When when we say gender-based violence, when She Safe, We Safe says we're going to end gender-based violence, what does he think that means? Please do not be afraid to share your answer if it's half or whole or you're completely unsure. This is a learning space. This is a space for us to figure out together. And again, we're going to come up with, I want to know what you all understand, and I'll tell you how we approach it in our work. Gender-based violence is targeted, okay. So mentioning sexual assault, domestic violence, police violence, violence against trans folk, and abuse of power, okay. Toxic masculinity, and how that pervades. Machismo, misgendering trans and gender nonconforming folk to the murder of trans women, period, yes. The criminalization of Black women, girls, femmes, and non-binary folk. Health providers address issues. Yes, Jacqueline, I love that you mentioned that, and we'll talk about it. Violence and intersection of power. Systems that target non-cis men, okay. Targeting people based on their gender, usually trans women and cis women, okay. Decriminalization of sex work. Violence enacting because of someone's gender as a cause. Interpersonal state violence. This is wonderful, y'all. I'm loving our collective knowledge that we have of this topic. Gender-based violence is the way we understand it and how this campaign approaches it. Gender-based violence is violence enacted on an individual based on their gender, and this can be both systemic and interpersonal, right? So systemic looks like a lot of things, right? It looks like any type of system that exists, honestly, in our nation. If we want to start at school, right? Gender-based violence looks like Black girls getting sent to ISS more than any other demographic in schools, right? If we want to go to work, if we want to go to our workplace, gender-based violence can look like sexual harassment. It can look like non-equal pay, right? The ability to not be able to take care of yourself because of money is violence, y'all. And the ones that are most impacted by that, yes, wages, the ones that are impacted by that are women, and then trans women, and then non-binary folk. Again, the deeper we go into the margins, the more the violence is, okay? If we want to talk about the state, right? We mentioned wages, but also the fact that our healthcare is tied to employment is violence. When you laugh because it's uncomfortable, not because it's funny. Right, our healthcare being tied to our wages is violence. When people don't have jobs, it says you don't deserve to take care of yourself. That's violence, you know? And then, you know, what we already know in terms of policing, right? In terms of the main people who's supposed to show up when we're harmed does harm to us, does violence to us.
Daño, nos perpetúan daños, las oficiales. Entonces es como entendemos la violencia basada en género. Nosotros, bueno, me gusta.
I mentioned the spectrum, right? Like violence, misgendering of folks and not acknowledging people in their dignity is violence, right? I see in here reproductive health as well, right? The fact that Black women die at more than 3 times a higher rate in childbirth than any other demographic in a developed nation is violence. Yes, all of these are valid and all of these count. But yes, this is how we understand it. Thank you all so much for sounding off in the chat. And again, when we go back to what our goals are for this campaign, is community-led solutions and addressing those things. Like, what is the solution for making sure that we have all we need to take care of ourselves? If we go off the understanding that crime is not committed because people are inherently like deceitful and hurtful and bad people, what do we actually need to take care of ourselves, right? Okay, let's delve into the next slide. I'm gonna need some more tea, y'all. She safe, we safe thus far. So a bit more about this campaign. You have our goals, but what have we been doing thus far? So this campaign, we have a couple of phases. The phases that we're in now is called the Story Collection Project phase, right? So we have been taking, we have a survey on our website that's for Black people to fill out and talk about their experiences with gender-based violence. We also have been holding what we're calling kitchen table conversations, definitely in the footsteps of Sister to Sister, in the footsteps of not critical resistance, but creative interventions, where we gather folks to be able to have a safe space to talk about our experience with gender-based violence. And out of these surveys and out of these conversations is the goal to figure out, again, if we're the experts of our own experiences, what do we feel like we need to be able to take care of ourselves, and what our people, like our members, have dedicated themselves to organizing around to make sure Black people have what they need to live in our fullest dignity. And so that's the phase that we're in currently. And then once this information is analyzed, we'll be able to put it out to show, to be able to report out our results, but also be able to use that to, one, tell people who haven't participated but want to know more about the results we have, but also to be able to share with folks who are doing work in policy and in lawmaking, and to show to city councils, right? To show to people who we have, perhaps if you engage in the voting process, put in charge of representing our interests and saying that, hey, we literally did the research because y'all need that sometimes. This is what we need. And this is what we say we need. Provide it, or we'll have to provide it for ourselves and make sure the work that you do, anything against that, does not work as well for you. That's what organizers' jobs are, is to get what we need for our people. And all of our people stand to benefit when we're targeting the margins of our society. Yummy. Next slide. So a bit more about some of the work I'm most excited about. A part of this campaign is narrative shift in communication. Now, perhaps I'm an optimist, y'all, or I'm just like super duper positive, is that I believe when people know better, they do better. And so that's why narrative shift is very, very important and excited for me in the midst of this campaign. So next slide. Some of the things that'll be coming out of this campaign shortly. Scroll. There might be a delay. I'll be patient. Okay. Some of the things I'm excited about for this is our newsletter that'll be coming out very, very soon. That's called The Harvest. I don't know if you all saw earlier, but we are a fans and loves and respect of Gwendolyn Brooks. This, a lot of these titles came out of the quote that says, we are each other's harvest, we are each other's business, and we are each other's magnitude and bond. So you have that. And here we have our newsletter where we'll be updating all constituents and people who want to be in the know of the campaign through Harvest, the newsletter, as well as starting a blog on the website called Magnitude and Bond, where we'll be cultivating as well as curating articles that talk about gender-based violence, all the ways that we mentioned, and their intersection and impact. So that means that there will be writers as well as, again, people who are looking for articles that should be featured on this website. And those will be on the blog. Also, this committee is currently closed, so this is a little dated slide, but we also put out a search for people who were really excited about graphic design and just, designing materials to make sure that the story that we're selling, that revolution is possible in our lifetime, looks good and is accessible to people in this moment. But I see the chat's going up on a Thursday. Newsletter, blog, okay. Then I'm excited about this. And yes, we will get into how you can contact me later, but there's already some little juice on this slide. But again, if we give people the means they need to be able to, again, know better, take in new information, apply that new information, and hopefully do better, then I do think we all can get closer to a collective society that is best for us. The next slide, please. So that is a general rundown of She Safe, We Safe. What I would like to do is be able to talk to you all about how to get more involved, as well as just what support looks like. Next slide, please. So, as I already said at the top, you can join a local chapter. The BYP is a Black autonomous organization, which means that only Black people are invited to join the organization. You can still be a supporter if you're non-Black, and the support can look like leveraging resources, right? Are you connected to people who we should be connected with that can help further the goals of this campaign? It can look like money if you got it. But if you don't got it, don't give it, y'all. Use that money for yourself. Support can also look like collaborating with people in like mind with this campaign, right? Is there an overlapping demographic that we serve, and we should be working together to expand our reach as individual organizations and support the folks that need to be supported. You can also, we have monthly organizing calls. The first Tuesday of each month at 7 p.m. Any and all people can be on those calls. We're working very diligently to make sure this is an accessible space where we'll be having closed captioners, perhaps ASL interpreters if everything pans out right, as well as translators, or I'm sorry, interpreters for English into Spanish. And so those are going to be happening every month for every first Tuesday of the month for the rest of the year. On that it's a bit of an update of what's been going on in the campaign, and we also introduce new initiatives that have formed based on our partnerships in the campaign. So, for example, in June, our organizing call was called "When Home Isn't Safe," and our partner, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, joined us for that call to talk about interpersonal and domestic violence in the wake of COVID. We also talked about in that space, like we said, when home isn't safe, we at that point, we just got shelter-in-place orders. And what does that mean when folks don't have a shelter to stay in place in, or a place to call home and to live in their dignity? What does that look like when we're giving those orders by the government? And that's not the reality of all people. Yes, in terms of also joining national chapters, we call it a national chapter, even though it's anybody who's not in a city that has a chapter. We have info sessions every other month. And so we had one in June, which means the next one's happening next month. Again, that space is open to all Black people. If you're looking to get involved, but you do not identify as Black, as in you're not Black, you can join the monthly organizing calls. You can shoot me an email, and we can talk about, again, what does support look like of this campaign and this organization. Next slide, and then we'll jump into questions. So yeah, signing up for our newsletter. The way to do that is literally just to email me at mariah@byp100, as I showed on these slides, as well as going to our website, byp100.org, and signing up for our newsletter. It's clickable on the website. Anybody can get the newsletter. We're not exclusive in terms of membership for the newsletter. Anybody can get that. Also, like I said, if you're interested in membership, our membership coordinator is Hannah, and you can hit up them at membership@byp100.org. Again, membership is limited to 18 to 35-year-old Black people. And I did see a question about that, and we'll jump into that soon. And then again, is there an organization that I need to be in communication with to be a part of this campaign that I can be able to support and we can support each other? Please have them email me at ssws@byp100.org. Individual questions that do not get answered within the next 30 minutes or so, you can send those to me at mariah@byp100.org, and I'll try my best to answer them. I'm a busy person, but I care about getting these questions answered and bringing as many people to the freedom side as possible. So I would love to get those questions. That being said, the next slide just includes my beautiful face, so we can show that as well, and then we can jump into the questions. Okay. We have open questions. I'm just going to read them out, I believe, in the order that they came in. Okay. What happens when you age out? Where do you transition to? That is a great question. So right now, we have an unofficial alumni chapter. And so the unofficial alumni chapter are members of BYP who've already aged out. As of right now, what the work of the alumni chapter looks like is exactly that, of building the container for what does showing up for BYP, what is showing up for your former political home look like once you're technically not the Youth and Black Youth Project anymore. Again, if you are already aged out, there is another member. Oh, you're welcome, y'all. Thank you so much for being here. If you are already aged out and you are Black, there is another level of membership to be considered, which is what we call squad membership. So squad membership is open to anyone and everyone that is Black who does not fall between the ages of 18 and 35. Squad membership also can be for people who don't have the time commitment to be able to dedicate as a full member. We ask full members to be able to dedicate at least 3 hours to the work on a weekly basis. And so that typically looks like attending a meeting and doing whatever the deliverables are for that meeting would be about like 3 hours. But squad is for people who fall outside of that purview, right? So not 18 to 35 and do not have the time to dedicate as a full member, be a squad member. Squad members also have like access to any of the resources we create for our members. And then also at times Avail gets first dibs on engagements that we build for the community at large. So an example of that would be BYP 100 is hosting a freedom school that's going to be starting up in August. And so that enrollment is open to our members, our prospective members, and our squad members first, and then open to everybody else after that. So age out question done. Carrie said, what language have you found most helpful in helping people embrace a broader understanding of violence? That's a really great question. So what I would like to point to and reference is a book called Arrested Justice, written by Beth Ritchie. Within that book, she explains or she defines what she calls the spectrum of violence. And in that spectrum, again, she includes how violence exists when it doesn't consider physical harm. How we said in this presentation that violence, one, anything where you cannot be in control of taking care of yourself is a form of violence. So not being able to feed yourself or your family is violence when there's people in control to make sure that that actually shouldn't be the case. That entity is violent. The government not being able to provide food or provide the wages needed for people to survive is violence. The fact that folks are currently losing benefits because their unemployment is getting more money than they were making when they were working is violence, right? But that resource, Arrested Justice by Beth Ritchie, really helped understand what violence meant for me beyond physical harm. And again, understanding that it can be enacted on an individual basis as well as an interpersonal one. Kathy asked if I'm thinking the one you said was in Fayetteville. Unfortunately, we do not have a chapter in Fayetteville. Our current one is called, our current chapter in North Carolina is the Durham chapter. But again, I'm typing the answer. Send. Okay. But anybody can, you can join as a national member. There's actually a few pockets of people, I don't want to misspeak, but there's definitely a few pockets of people within North Carolina that's not in Durham who are working to build chapters in other cities. That is a question you would have to talk to Hannah about. And again, Hannah's email, and I'll respond to that here. So it's her name, first name at byp100.org. To talk about, what does forming a chapter look like if that's something that you're interested in. I think I just answered this question. I put arrested justice in the chat. Did it pop up? Yeah, maybe. Arrested justice. I'll type it again here. There's a lot more, but that's just one of the ones that we lean as an organization. We actually have a book club. BYP 100 has a book club where we read books every other month, I guess, at this point, to be able just to dive deeper into what a Black queer feminist politic looks like when it's enacted. And if people are interested in joining that book club, I'll put the link in the chat. And that book club is also open to anyone and everyone. Again, still working on making sure it's accessible beyond English listeners and speakers. But very excited about that. Arrested Justice is actually our book for this month, so hop on if you want to delve into that quickly. And also in terms of accessibility, Beth, loves BYP 100 has given us access to the chapters that we'll be reading for that book club. So if you don't have the book, you'll still be able to participate in the book club. Beautiful. Are there any other questions, y'all? I hope this was really helpful. I'm actually really excited for more questions to enter my inbox beyond this moment. I really do think that and believe in terms of how I approach my work that we are all that we need as people. We know how to take care of ourselves. We just need the resources to be able to do so. And then the people who don't yet know how to take care, that they're willing and able to learn how to show up for the people that they say we care about. Hashtags that have been popping up as of late has just been putting all in front of hashtags, right? So all Black Lives Matter, Black trans women matter, because all necessarily folks are not considered. How do we make sure that the people who are not usually considered are considered? Yeah, that's really all I have. I'm looking at the questions again in the chat. But yes, thank you everybody for attending. I'm excited, Fayetteville packed. Yes, hit me up. Thank you all so much. Yes, sliding to my inbox. That's a permission to solicit me in my inbox. Please do. A question. Boop, 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 boop. Who is in Greensboro? Definitely email me about that so I'm not giving you out inaccurate information of who is national members in Greensboro who are trying to form a chapter. Yes, Mariah at byq100.org.
Thank you so much, Mariah. That was great. I wonder if you will, if you're interested, but we have a little bit more time. And so I was wondering if you just wanted to spend the last little time being open to like just one or two questions I might have for you, and seeing if that, you know, maybe stirs up some other questions from our group.
Yeah, that's perfect.
I'm thinking about, you know, some of the prominent public discourse at this time. And I'm thinking about defund police efforts. And I'm thinking about, you know, just along with that, just like the title of this series, like you were saying, also defund the police being paired with refunding, investing in our communities. And I'm wondering that what are some of the things, some of the resources that you feel like are really essential for our people? Like when you talk about what our people need, all our people need is the resources, you know, for empowerment. What do you think when you think about this campaign? And when you think about your communities, what do you think are some of the most essential resources that we really need in our communities?
Yeah. Thank you for that question, Femi. I've been much more of a Twitter bug since this whole pandemic started. And one of my favorite things I've seen on Twitter with people who are just coming into organizing work saying are things like, my older sister is better at de-escalating a situation than the police, right? Mm-hmm. So when we say that we're all we need, it's literally things like that, right? Like we already have the tools in ourselves to be able to take care of us how we need to. And so in terms of like the police, like we as a society, not me, I'm not for them. We as a society put so much expectation on police, right? When you get into a car accident, the police are called. Why? They're not medics. Why are they called? They're called because in North Carolina, you have to have insurance, and you cannot process your insurance claim without a police report. Like these are ways that are integrated into how our society is set up in terms of what quote unquote care looks like. But what would be the case if the first responders to like a car accident weren't people who actually had guns and the authority to kill you, right? What if we already have in place, like I know Durham has a local cop watch, right? For community to be like, okay, I'm not trusting that this interaction is going to be the safest, but I have a responsibility to do so. What if the cop watch had funding in order to give training to people throughout Durham, throughout North Carolina, throughout the South, to be able to look out for each other in ways that, again, don't involve the police? Also in terms of investing in communities, there's plenty of organizations who are already doing this work, right? So when I mentioned In Money Bail in conjunction and led by Song, part of what their work is helping formerly incarcerated people integrate back into society as smoothly as possible, right? Like jail is really trash, y'all. Jail says, no, you're not legally convicted of anything yet, but you're not going to be able to work until you get this court date. I don't know what you're going to do about your kids because you can't go to work, so you can't take your kids. On top of that, how do you take care of all your responsibilities when you're being held for something that's not legally your fault yet? So organizations like, in terms of Durham, because I used to be my home, I'm thinking of our places like Forward Justice. Forward Justice is also an organization that focuses on formerly incarcerated people being reintegrated into society. Again, forward, like we're not going to be punished for this forever. I'm thinking of Spirit House, who does similar work in terms of activating formerly incarcerated people, as well as bringing out the artists in all of us in order to be able to show up for community in the way that shows up for ourselves as well. I think that I'm thinking about the task force that Durham Beyond Policing put forth in as an alternate proposal last year that is currently being bastardized by a city council. But put forward a proposal saying that, one, you can't have people responsible for killing folks be in charge of like monitoring themselves. Like that doesn't work. Community-led means that members of the community are in charge of this and have discretion over this. And that's currently not what's happening in terms of what Durham City Council has tried to move on in terms of redefining what that task force looks like. It looks like, it also looks like, I guess I'll give Durham a win and a positive. It looks like participatory budgeting, right? Which is literally saying that here is money that community members decide what to do with it. Now, if we can't necessarily, based on, I guess, popular vote is what gets chosen. Like, you know, some things are just like, yes, the neighborhood needs to be a bit more beautiful. We need a bit more splash of color here. But what if it was like making sure there was funding going into a community center, making sure transportation was available for that community center, making sure that people of a certain fiscal, like financial demographic didn't have to pay for their children to go there or to eat. Like there's so many ways that we already taking care of each other, but just need the funds in order to do it. And there is no major city within the United States that gets less than a third of their budget going to policing. It's way too much money. Give it to the people.
Sure.
I think we have a question on the chat. It's in Spanish and I can translate it. Martha's asking if there are any articles or essays that could be translated into Spanish to start having these conversations with people in the community that speak Spanish.
That's a really great question. It's definitely not something I can answer off the top of my head, but I would love to be able to provide some follow-up post this call for everybody who attended this particular series. Just because Google Translate, in terms of translating pages, are not the most reliable for making sure a message is heard and understood. But yes, I'm making a pledge to be able to provide you all with some of those resources. For that exact conversation to be able to happen.
Thank you. I had one quick question. I don't know if it'll be quick, but so you mentioned that y'all were trying to do some narrative shift, and I'm wondering what are some of the things in the newsletter that is coming up that y'all want to shift, or anything right now that needs to, like, some urgent shifting.
Yeah, thank you for that, Diego. A big narrative shift that a big current narrative that we're currently experiencing being challenged is that public safety looks like policing. Public safety looks like police being in communities, watching people to make sure they don't commit crimes. And in this moment, we're seeing that actually public safety doesn't include police. There hasn't been much coverage anymore of protests because protests haven't been violent because police aren't escalating situations. but that's not, but if the narrative is that police keep us safe and there's no violence being enacted, then there's nothing for the news to show that proves that police keep us safe, which is why we're not seeing those things anymore. So narrative shift would include, again, pointing out in the ways where police do not keep us safe and the examples of what happens when police do try and do their job. I believe it was the Surgeon General came out yesterday and was saying how that the only way to really control COVID in this moment is for there to be a mandatory enforcement of masks in public. And the Surgeon General said, that is true, but we live in they essentially said, we live in a society where it's dangerous for that to be enforced. They underhandedly said that cops cannot be trusted to enforce this policy without actually causing more harm, which is really big, right? That's a huge deal to say that the way that we need to be able to survive this moment as a people is to be able to wear a mask, and to enforce it actually can't be done by the people who need to keep us safe, who we have charged to keep us safe, who we have given a third of our budgets for the city to keep us safe. That's a really big deal. I don't have time to write that article, but when it comes out, I will make sure it is written in Spanish también. I'm excited for that one, most definitely.
Thank you. And are there any narratives right now that you see with that include like something around gendered violence that needs to shift around policing? I know I hear people saying I know one of the things for people like that it's hard for them to understand like why we need to defund the police is that they bring up like what's it called, domestic violence, and so I don't know if you have anything to say about that.
Yeah, I think what also is happening now is that, again, if police don't keep us safe, then what do? And the answer is actually escalate situations and only show up after the fact. Like police are not a preventative entity of violence. An example of that in terms of domestic violence is that many people who are survivors of domestic violence say that nothing can be done until violence is enacted upon them about the person that hurts them. And police won't do anything until that physical like violence has happened. Like even police are not understanding violence as something that can be done until like physically it happens, which is wild because you can get charged with things like premeditated, whatever, or you can get charged with attempted. But in terms of actually befriending that to happen, police don't do anything about that. In that one, and then also in terms of just survivor-led and survivor-needed things, enforcing protective orders also doesn't go well with survivors. As in, if somebody's like, I need a restraining order against this person because my life is threatened, the most that police will really do is like, if you violate that call, this person will be arrested and that person will be released the next day, or that person is able to get out on bail. Like any of the systems that we see existing actually are not sufficient in actually keeping people safe. They're efficient in like, the runaround in terms of like kind of keeping people back until they come back again, or preventing having to deal with something in the moment, like fully resolving something in the moment. But in terms of like this is the problem and this is the solution, our current system only has Band-Aids as it's funded by our government. The police are not actually, they're not doctors, they're not surgeons, they're not people who can fix a problem. They're people who can stave off a problem. They're people who can make the problem worse, but not as an entity that actually solve crime. I actually hate the term solve crime, because solving crime is, again, if crime is something committed out of necessity, desperation, or necessity or desperation, then the only way to solve that is to fill the need or to get rid of the desperation. If people are stealing money because they need to eat, then give people more money. That's the actually solving of the crime. You don't actually solve the crime, you prevent the crime from needing to exist in the first place. And police don't exist in order to do that.
Right, and for like domestic violence, it would be some preventative work around that, which is what like y'all are trying to do, like shift culture and.
Right. So if police only show up after the fact, then who are the organizations and who are the people who are serving survivors in the moment? When members of BRP 100 got trained in order to hold these spaces for survivors, we went to Black Women's Blueprint in Brooklyn, New York. That's their work, right? They focus on meeting survivors where they're at and providing them with the resources they need to move forward, as well as to seek a form of justice that they see fit for themselves. And so we learned how to hold space for them in our conversations. We learned how to make sure that our work and our language is survivor-centered. But that was only just us, right? That was only people who are able to experience that training in order to do that. Goal 2 of our campaign is those interventions, is making sure other people are so fortified to be able to show up for community the way they need to. It means us working again with Black Women's Blueprint, working again with the trainers that was a part of that, to make sure that what we learn can be mass produced in order for other folks to be able to know how to show up for community. So yes, it takes funds, but it also takes people who are willing in order to show up for community. And the society that we live in does not center community at all. You know, we are told that our failings are individual and they're our fault, which is the greatest lie, when that's not the case, right? When based on where you come into society, whether born or you come here, everything depends on other people, yet you're told that everything is your fault. Like literally everything depends on what other people choose or decide to do, but you're told that your failings are your own. And so in terms of narrative shift, what is also that narrative, right, of changing the individualism that pervades our society? It's changing that you only look out for yourself. It's changing that the whole know your neighbor is not like being nosy. It's actually caring about the people who are you're surrounded by, and knowing who they are. A very small example. When I used to live in Durham, I still had a job where I was fortunate enough to work from home. And I remember seeing water management come around the neighborhood and was turning off people's water. It was a time, I think in Durham, there was like a weird spike and they were just turning off people's water because it wasn't being paid. But the point is I went outside and I was just like, hi, good afternoon. Whose water are you turning off? It's not yours. I'm aware it's not mine, but it's my neighbor's. Whose water are you turning off? And he told me. But the point is that this person would have came home with their family and not be able to give their children a bath because it's not our business to know about those things. Like, it's not our business to care about the people who are around us. Like I said, I really think it does just start with narrative shift in terms of what people think or what we think as individuals too, right? Like, what's our business and what's not? I think people are our business. And when we make people our business, then that means that we're able to actually know how to show up and take care of people and keep each other safe.
Thank you. That was really good.
So thank you so much. We want to give last call for any last questions, and then we're going to close out. All right. Again, you know, this has been She Say, We Say, thinking about divestment, you know, through a Black queer feminist lens with the lovely Mariah. Thank you so much again for joining us, for telling us all the things. And I just want to go back. Yeah, you know, if you want to sign up for the newsletter, be sure to follow up in the ways that Mariah asked for. Here are also like the different emails. And also just want to take some time to see if Felicia has anything to say.